Ladies and gentlemen, this is episode 5 of Battling Basic, and today we have one of the most decorated athletes that I know. We have 3-time Olympic medalist Tonya Verbeek. Tonya medaled at the 2004, 2008, and the 2012 Olympics. Aside from that, she medaled on 3 separate occasions at 3 different world championships, so she is actually a 6-time world medalist. Tonya was the first female wrestler to medal for Canada at the Olympics. She did this in the 2004 Olympics in Athens, Greece. Tonya is also the first female athlete to become a both men's and women's freestyle wrestling national team coach. So that is quite a hefty resume. So we're looking forward to this podcast. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we have here Tonya Verbeek. Battling Basic. So Tonya, I want to ask you, can you kind of just give us a rundown of how you got into freestyle wrestling and kind of how you got to the point of becoming world class? That is a big question, but I need to know, because how often do you meet someone like that, right? So can you just kind of give us like a rundown?
For sure. You know what? I stumbled across wrestling. It was something that was offered in the school system. I went to Beamsville High School, just up the street, and it was, offered for girls for the first time, and that was when I was in grade 11, 16 years old. And at that time, I just was involved in all different sports and enjoyed competition and what sport, gave to me. I enjoyed being involved and being active. So I went out and just tried it. And I ended up, honestly, I did not think that it would have been something that I would have continued doing competitively for 20 years.
Most people don't think that.
And, I fell in love with it. Within that year, I was competing and wanting to be involved at all levels. And I was in a fortunate situation. My high school coach, he had the opportunity to bring me up to Brock University during my high school years. So I kind of had that high performance, room that I was exposed to right off the start.
Okay.
To kind of see a glimpse into what could be after high school. So my choices in school to pick a school that had wrestling was really important to me. And so at that time, we had an OAC year, so basically a grade 13 year. So I had 3 years still in high school competing at a high school level, but I actually competed nationally, went to my first world championships in 1995. That was my second year of wrestling, and so at that time there was no age group world championships for women, so it was a senior
So it was just free for all.
Yeah, and I was 17 years old, so
Jeez.
it was really so I was exposed to that, and I ended up placing 5th. It was the way the draw was, and I didn't think that I wrestled well, and thought, well, everyone's like, wow, you placed 5th in the world, and I thought, well, yeah, I didn't really feel like I was a 5th in the world in my performance, but
So you think it's a fluke, eh?
it was just, it really, I had a good nationals. I don't think the best women at that time were at my weight class that nationals. So I think that it was meant to happen, that I, was exposed to that so early to understand what the sport could provide me, moving forward. And women at that time,
I feel like you're underselling yourself.
well, at that time, been only wrestling for 2 years. It's quite a big step.
Yeah.
So, but it gave me a look into what could be in wrestling, and so I knew I wanted to continue on to university and wrestle and hope to make the national team again and be exposed to the best. And that's how I kind of that kind of is how my pathway was created. And so I applied for a few schools. I ended up accepting and going to Brock, which, you know, it was a local university for me, so it made sense.
And they have a good program, obviously, right?
And yes, and then at that time, the women in the program were just starting to be built into the university system.
Okay.
So that was new for Brock as well. So yeah, it was, you know, I was very fortunate. Just the things that I guess my choices, but also having that exposure, I was very fortunate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
things just kind of fell into place, you feel?
It did, and I had the right people. Like I had, you know, they always say how much a coach can impact an athlete's career, and I honestly will say that my high school coach, Dave Colley, was you know, someone that believed in me, someone that, you know, pushed me to see my true potential, and kept me on the right track. So, you know, I'll always be thankful and appreciative of his support and his, you know, the grassroots, so important, you know, how you
Shout
develop.
out to Dave Colley.
Yes. Yeah, and so it honestly, like, those type of things really helped. And I mean, but most of all, I decided and chose to continue because I loved wrestling, you know, and I obviously still do, so.
Yeah. Because you're obviously still involved right now, right? Okay, so I want to ask you, like, you started off and then you eventually got to a level that was world class. Like, you got silver in Athens, you got bronze in Beijing, and silver in London. So you got to the most elite level in your craft. From when I look at a sport, there is people that are good, or not even just a sport, anything, any craft. There are people that are good, and then there's people that are just world class. Like, they're just a cut above everyone else. From your experience, what quality do you think separates those two? Because some people say, like, you know, it's a sickening work ethic. Some people say, they argue that it's not the work ethic, because they say at the highest level everyone works really hard. They say it's more of a mindset change. There's a point where their mindset just changed, and that's when they became the absolute best. From your experience, what do you think it was?
That's a great question. That's a heavy question. So as I was saying about my career early, I made the national team in 1995. Well, I wasn't the number one girl in my weight class until 2004.
What?
So
9 years?
Yeah. And so you know, I really had to understand me. Like, ultimately, like, I worked hard. You know, of course, along the way, I found out how to work even harder or smarter, I guess you could say, and doing the right things in training, and doing what you have to do to be good at your sport. But I really had to work on my mental approach to my my game. And you know, there were times where I remember having these, like, moments that I felt like it was just a reach away, like that win was just a reach away, but there was something holding me back, and I had to find what that was.
Okay.
And for me, it was like really being confident in my ability and believing in my success and what I could be and what I wanted to be. And so, you know, I did a ton of mental work, visualization, and I journaled all the time.
I know you're huge on journaling, right?
I am.
I've actually, ever since you told me that, I've started doing, I'm not consistent with it, but I write stuff down now. So I think it helps, because it kind of just, when things are in your mind, they're just all jumbled up and all over the place. But when you put it on a tangible piece of paper, it's organized, and you can kind of you don't have to remember what you thought that time. It's on a piece of paper. You can come back and just revisit it right away.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And it's whatever you want it to be. You know, it could be just, you know, some random stuff, but it could also be very specific, you know, concrete, almost like you're in school sort of concept, you know. So yeah, so I just, you know, I really had to work hard at understanding my mind and being able to be at my best in those pivotal moments in matches. And
Is there anything specific that helped you understand your mind better? Like, was it the journaling, or was it the imagery, or like the visualization?
It was I would say it was a blend. It was a blend of things, you know. I did do a ton of visualization. I saw sports psych a couple times just to, understand some mental strategies that might help, self-talk. I had keywords that I really focused in on. Having conversations with coaches, like just on your mindset and talking it through, and then of course the journaling, and honestly, it was like trial and error, like failure. Having some of those big matches that I lost to, and like I said, I could just see that I was just a reach away and so close, and then knowing that helped me understand what I needed to do to make that next step forward.
Yeah.
Was I distracted at the end of a match? Towards the end of a match, how could I, wrestle that full match to my fullest potential and come out on top? So like those type of things, and it just takes time and patience. Sometimes is really what it is.
Yeah.
And every athlete's different.
9 years, like, that's perseverance.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Thanks. Well, you know what? It came all together at the right time in 2004, when women were put into the Olympics for the first time in wrestling. So I was so ready for those matches that there's no way I was going to walk away not winning and not going on the Olympic journey. So
Honestly, that's like perfect timing. Like, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. That's what they say, right? And
Yeah.
that's pretty much what happened 2004. And you were the first woman for Canada to actually medal at the Olympics for freestyle wrestling, right? So now that we're on that topic, can you kind of talk to me about that? Because there's a lot of people that do great things, and then there's people that do great things for the first time. And like, pretty much you're a woman in freestyle wrestling, and like at that time it was probably considered like a predominantly masculine sport. Can you kind of talk to me about maybe some of the struggles you experienced being the first woman to medal at the 2004 Olympics? Because there was probably a lot of doubters, and there's probably a lot of people being like, "Oh no, you shouldn't do that," or whatnot. From what I assume, I don't know if that's what you actually experienced, but
I think everyone's different. Every woman out there they've had different stories and struggles and opportunities. And so, I will speak to some of my old teammates, from the West Coast, like different places. And, sometimes they definitely have different stories. And, I think I was very fortunate and sometimes maybe a little bit naive to what people thought, or maybe I just had a really good attitude about focusing in on what matters and the people around me that want to support me.
like the tunnel vision kind of.
Yeah. But I did have some really good, mentors and coaches that bought into women's wrestling, not right away. Some of them did not. So I'd say that is sometimes even within our own wrestling culture, that took time for some of the older generations to accept women on the mats and in the wrestling room and in competition and all the rest, because it completely changed our sport. I mean, you didn't have a gender involved for from the beginning, and then all of a sudden, you have a different gender, and it creates a different culture.
Yeah.
Automatically,
And some countries still don't have it.
No,
right?
absolutely. Like there are many countries that don't, or it's very separate. It's very separate from the men. Whereas in Canada, what we did really well is we combined our training right from the get-go, and not in every room, but I would say the majority.
Yeah.
And
Like in the States, they still don't combine it, do they?
not all the time, no. So,
Okay.
and I think it also is a numbers game. You know, we are smaller, so, and maybe we have some restrictions in terms of like when we can have the wrestling room, or do we have the time, do we have the coaches, do we have like the facilities,
Yeah. Yeah.
in order to make that happen. But there are some that have a lot of numbers, and like out in at Simon Fraser University, like I know that they have separate women's and men's practices. But I'm just saying, at the very beginning, I think it was important because I was exposed to great coaches from the start, and they developed me as an athlete, not as a female athlete. And so that is something that really helped me. There was definitely struggles, going back to your initial question. But I also looked at, I was like, I'm that type of person, like, you give me a challenge, like, I'm going to accept it and I'm going to prove you wrong, sort of thing. And maybe at that time, I had that little bit of a chip on my shoulder, in the sense of, you're not going to tell me what I can't do. I will show you what I can do. That really helped me, just overcome the small talk, really, is the negative.
But the thing is, like, there's people that struggle with it today, right? And I look at it in the sense that, well, if there's some people that are struggling today, how did people back then
I'm not
deal
that
with
old.
it? Okay.
I'm just joking. I am.
Well, like, it's not even that. It's just like, it wasn't even that long ago. But it's just like the way things have shifted. It's been quick, right?
Yes.
It's been quick, and it's just like, you were the pioneer of this, and you were one of like the original gangsters, pretty much. You were like the original gangster. You led the way, and now it's easier for females to kind of get into sport, and especially like a masculine sport. Like, if you look at the past few years, for instance, I'll bring up like Ronda Rousey, right? She pioneered women's MMA, and she got really popular because she was this female badass who was just kicking everyone's ass, and she got into the movies and stuff, and she became very popular. And good for her, respect to her. But I think about it in the sense that you were doing this in 2004 and even before.
And I wasn't the first. There was a generation before me that, world championships were actually in the 80s for women. And a lot of people don't know that. And
I had no idea.
Yeah. And so, like, I look at even the females before me within Canada that helped pave the pathway. And, I thank them. So for me, I think it's important to recognize, like, there are definitely people that don't get the opportunity as things didn't align as easily for them as maybe it did for me. So I think, I look at wrestling as an amazing sport, and yes, it might be deemed as a male dominant type of sport, but combative sport has actually, it's been around a long time. And I know like boxing is now being more integrated with the women, and of course MMA, but taekwondo and judo and all these different combative sports, they've been in the mix for quite some time. And it's and I understand that, one thing that we did really well in Canada is, like, we competed against females. There were times at the very start that women didn't. I never had to. So I always competed against another female. I practiced with men and boys, like, in high school, and that really helped me improve my skill set and understand the sport. And just getting different training partners was like really key. I think that as a society in Canada, we are definitely going to have people that are trying to limit opportunities for women in sport. But there are also so many great people that want to see it happen. And you see the participation levels increasing all the time, not just in our sport, but, like, say, for example, women's soccer, and and I think the Olympic, when women are exposed at the Olympics and they're shown in the social media as strong and fierce, and they empower other young women to aspire to be and to get involved, and so like that's something that I think is awesome when it comes to the Olympic movement. And that's because we watch as a country the Olympics in all different sports.
Mm-hmm.
And so our sport has been exposed to the public more and more. And I mean, I guess social media is just like, ramped right up. So we've benefited from that in our sport, I think.
For sure.
But it just shows opportunity. It just shows that you can participate, and some people aren't even aware of it, right?
Yeah.
So, I have people still to this day trying to understand and wrap their head around that I'm a wrestler,
Yeah.
And
It's new. It's different, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't really meet someone that does that.
yeah, and there's just like this stereotype that like I'm supposed to be some huge, kind of butchy.
Speed matters. Speed matters.
And then I say, well, we're weight class. And then it's a whole, it's an education piece. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Making people understand our sport a little bit more. Like, not every male wrestler is big. No. Not at all.
Yeah.
How many weight classes do we have? So it's, so it's really interesting. But, like, just in terms of, like just our like, since 2004, we had 4 weight classes at the Olympics for women, and now we're at 6, and we're equal to the men.
Oop. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Should we get that? Call in.
Jeez. Anyways, continue.
Yeah. So, I like we almost lost our sport, as you know.
Yeah.
And that was after 2012, I believe. Yes, I'm trying to remember the dates there. And we were pushed from the International Olympic Committee to equalize more in our sport, and the question was why? Why do you have uneven amount of weight classes for women and men?
So that was one of the reasons, eh?
One of them.
Okay.
There were different rules, and I'm sure a lot of politics too.
Yeah.
But that was something they had asked, and so then Rio, we had 6 Greco, 6 freestyle men, and 6 female.
Mm-hmm.
And it was even across. So like those things have changed, and like you said, in quite a short period of time, I guess you could look at it. They fly by, I know, but I mean from 2004 to 2016, we had 3 Olympics from there. So it's exciting times. Like, I think I really came into the sport at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
So but we continue to just want to, especially worldwide. I think worldwide is a little bit more of an indication that we are still sometimes, we're definitely behind, like in that way, and some countries, not accepting it or completely wanting it separate. But then you do see some countries involved that you would never imagine they would be. So
Yeah.
It's like, I'm like maybe miss positive here, but I think that like you do see some great movements, and what I notice the most now that I'm coaching are that the coaches are super passionate and super involved, and typically they're male coaches.
Mm-hmm.
At this time. We are now starting to integrate more women coaching because they've retired wrestling and now moving and giving back to the sport, but that's just starting to evolve now.
Mm-hmm.
So we have male coaches from different countries that you would not maybe think they would have women's wrestling, and they're completely committed to this program. And it's really what it comes down to is it's sport, and what do we want to do? We want to win.
Yeah.
And we want to represent our country, and we want to bring home medals and be the best we can. So that's what's happening.
Yeah.
They're buying into what it's truly about.
So, like, you say you're Miss Positive, and, like, it sounds like you just have a really positive mindset. Is that what it is? Is that, like, like I completely agree with you. Like it's getting a lot better, and like you have to focus on that. But in your pursuit of trying to be the best you can, you probably had doubters. Is that how you dealt with them, being positive? Like, how did you deal with it? Because you have that in any situation. In any situation, you have doubters. So, like, how do you deal with that then? Because is it the positivity you're speaking about right now?
Yeah, and like I mean, honestly, like I'm super hard on myself, of critical of myself in what I do in my life and in sport, and it's easy to be critical, right? But I think when I think of how to be successful, having a positive attitude and mindset was really important to me. Wasted time would be thinking about the negatives
Yeah.
and the what couldn't be, and the can't and all that. So yeah, I guess maybe it was something that I did do, and it's not like it just came naturally. I think I had to work on it.
Because at your hardest times, it's probably tough to be positive, no?
Absolutely, yeah.
So like you just worked on it. Like how was it that you got to be good at it?
You know what? I think perspective, like putting things into perspective, was really key for me. Like if, I had a situation where, I didn't come out ahead and do exactly what I wanted to achieve, I found a way to figure out, like, I remember times where, I lost nationals or, had a bad world championships. And, of course, the very automatic feeling is just, okay, let's pack it in. Or you don't want to deal with it because it hurts.
Yeah.
It really stings, which makes sports so challenging, right? And so addicting in certain ways because, you have these like heartbreaks and these failures, and you're just like, okay, well, now what? So I would always bring it back to the mats. Like for me, I didn't stay away too long. I had to deal with it, and me dealing with it was going through all those emotions. So, I'd get back on the mat and try to make it better. Like that was my whole thing, is how can I be better today?
Yeah. So you would like get on the mats right away and just try to fix the issues.
Yeah, even if it was just me, like literally standing on the mat and reflecting on my competition.
Really? Because you meet those people, they're just like, I need to take a break for a while. I need to, go home, take a few weeks off, and then I can come back and deal with it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
and I did have those times in my career where I had to take a step back and refresh, and breaks are very important for many aspects, and mostly the mental.
Right.
So it's not that I went back and kept like super like training harder or anything, but it was more just like figuring out, like reflecting and then accepting and then moving forward. So the moving forward part was like the biggest step.
Okay.
Like if you don't take that step forward, you're just gonna be like, in your misery.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like for me, longevity was important for me in my career. And so if I didn't take that step forward, it would have been pretty tough to continue year after year and retire at a pretty, older age, I guess you could say. And I talked to some past teammates, and they asked me that, like, how did you stay, like, how are you still doing this? Why are you still doing it?
I was going to ask you that next.
Yeah, well.
Longevity, yeah.
It's key for our sport. Like, I mean, it's a super tough sport. I was fortunate. I didn't have a ton of injuries that, pushed me out of the sport. It was never injury related. If I, didn't go to a competition, there was like 1 year I had a really bad year, but other than that, I was pretty fortunate, I'll be honest. Like, I look at some other athletes that have struggled and gone through a ton of surgeries and everything like that, and that's a whole other adversity to, deal with. And but
I never understood that. Like, some people are just so much more injury prone. Like, obviously, part of it is just taking care of yourself and whatnot, but some people are just straight out unlucky, So
I agree, and like I was the lucky one that way. Like I broke my ankle actually after 2004. It was a total fluke, but that actually pushed me to have the break I needed. So that was interesting, you know.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, like it basically said no.
it worked out.
It
Yeah.
worked out, and so, but honestly, if I had to do that like year after year, that would have, maybe I wouldn't have stayed in the sport as long. So that was one thing. I was pretty healthy that way. For me, like, I mean, I made my first Olympic team when I was 27. So I felt like I was just getting going, you know, and I wanted more is really like, it's,
Like you got that little taste and you just wanted to keep going.
yeah. And so, and then after 2008, like, I'll be honest, it was one of those, I don't know. And every year, I was just taking every year at a time.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking too far ahead to London. So that was something that was really key for me to kind of keep on that four extra years. It was just kind of one step at a time. You know, I always promised myself that I would retire only because it felt right. You know, not because of, you know, what other people thought, you know, my age, you know, potential like career. You know, I have a teaching degree and background, and so I was substitute teaching during from 2004 on. So, you know, some people thought, well, why wouldn't you like retire and get into teaching full time? It's such a secure position, you know, you have a pension, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, it all sounds great on paper, but to be honest with you, if it's not like you know, in my heart to be able to do that, then I wasn't going to.
Yeah.
So I was very true to myself.
Stability doesn't necessarily mean happiness, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's what I encourage other athletes to do, is just like, you know, do what you feel is right for you, because it's different for everyone. And so that's how I stayed in the career, like my athletic career, as long as I did, and retired after London. So it was, yeah, even I remember my parents, after Beijing in '08, they were like, oh, so you're going to retire and move on? And I'm like, no, not necessarily. And they're like, what do you mean not necessarily? And I used to always have my favorite year was the year after the Olympics. It was my favorite year to compete.
After 2008?
After every Olympics. I had like the best time competing.
Really?
Yeah, it was just like the pressure's off, like just like back to the basics sort of feeling. And yeah, it was really...
Because leading up to the Olympics, it was a lot of pressure probably.
A lot of stress and pressure, and then as soon as that's over, it's like kind of like a relief.
Yeah.
In certain ways. So then that year I just would go out and, you know, maybe compete. I wanted to compete against someone that I might have not met at the Olympics, and I wanted to know that I was gonna could beat them, that they weren't on my side of the draw or something like that. Like those little challenges that were
like personal challenges.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fun.
Wow. So like pretty much what you're saying is that like if you feel something deep down in your gut, just listen to what your gut's telling you rather than listen to what society has to tell you. That's pretty much what society was telling you, was that, you know, get that teaching gig and have a secure job and stuff, but you felt like you needed to stay and kind of pursue that. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, I am always a true believer in the, you know, go by your gut, go by your heart sort of instinct in a lot of things in my life, to be honest. So that was natural to me. So it wasn't like, you know, I wasn't going to be kicked out of the sport or leave the sport on any other terms but my own.
Because you can teach for the rest of your life if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And it worked out well. You're not even teaching now. You're the national team coach, right? So.
Well, I knew that I wanted to get into coaching, and I think teaching, you know, definitely gave me that idea, and you know, the passion of just helping others and being able to give back to my sport was huge. So
okay.
Yeah, and I knew, I would say even 4 to 6 years prior to my retirement, I knew that I wanted to pursue coaching. It felt right. And
because you were probably doing it on the side or whatnot.
Yes, I was. Okay. Yeah, I was. And so, yeah, it wasn't like brand new once I retired. Like the transition from being an athlete to coach, it was a smooth transition for
Yeah.
me, because I think it's very well, a lot of athletes struggle with retirement and what's next sort of idea. And it's tough because you're doing something for so many years, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's out of your life. So with coaching, it gave me a chance to keep in the sport, and
So it helped you think, cause
absolutely.
you hear of those athletes that like once they retire, they kind of like get depressed and stuff because they've been doing that for so long, they don't really know anything else, right? So you think that helped you out a lot
Yeah,
when you,
absolutely.
and also like just the fact that you were able to go for so long and you kind of just did everything you wanted to in the sport too.
I felt
probably.
satisfied. Like I said, like I didn't feel pushed out. I was so blessed that way, that I could go on and leave on a high for the most part. I mean, yeah, that gold would have been really exciting, but I honestly, like when I stepped out on the mat in my last match of my career against the Japanese, who I lost to at the other two Olympics and every World Championships that I medaled at, I just told myself, like, at the end of the day, whatever happens, like, you're going to step out there and you're going to be, you're going to be so happy to end your career this way, and represent your country one last time. And it was just like, I walked out like, and you would be able to relate to this, because there aren't that many moments when you wrestle, like especially big matches, that you're clear, like your mind is clear. And
It's always foggy.
it's typically foggy, and you walk off the mat after a match and you're not really sure really what happened, and it's hard to put together because there are a lot of like the stress, the emotion, just lots going on, right? But I remember walking out for the open, like the last match, and just marching out, and I was just like happy. And it was a weird moment.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just like, this is awesome.
That's
And
how you want to end, for sure.
yeah,
Like,
so
and why do you think that happened? Like,
it's just, what, like I didn't put any pressure on myself, like this is the last match of your life, like it
you
was.
were at peace?
I was at peace.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a great word to describe it. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel a rush of inspiration right now.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
Wow, that's okay. So pretty much you went out on your own terms. Regardless of the result, you were happy with how you left because you did everything that you could have, and you were, even in your last moments, happy, and you were clear-minded.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think that's big, like being able to know that you've done everything you could. I mean, I think human nature, it's so easy to look back and go, oh, I wish I did this, or why didn't I do that, like one last thing, or, maybe that would have made the difference. But honestly, like that would just drive people insane
For
to
sure.
do that all the time. And so you have to be, like you said, at peace and be content with all the hard work. And, especially if like you're pretty true to yourself, like I think that's key. And so I felt that, and again, I felt blessed because I had I had a long career. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So pretty much, like, I think people put way too much emphasis on the actual name of the result. But the thing is, it's just when you pursue something that's difficult, it's the only person that really knows how much was put into it is you, right? So, and no matter how much you try and explain it to other people, it's impossible. It's literally impossible. You can probably get close to explaining the full depth of what you've experienced, but I really think that the only person that knows is you. So when you say be true to yourself, I really think that's pretty key. And it sounds like from how you explain it, that's pretty much what happened with you.
Yeah,
Right.
and I mean, again, it didn't happen overnight, right? Like this was a journey, and every athlete has their own story and journey, and it's pretty cool listening to other Olympic athletes from different sports, or even my teammates. They had a completely different journey. Like my friend Carol Wynn, we are very different athletes. we have different stories, but like it's pretty cool to share that with others too, because first of all, I've learned a ton from my teammates and their experiences, and just being around them and exposed. That's what sports like so awesome. Even though we're an individual sport, we have such a team concept, right? So I was very fortunate to have some like great people in my years and in the mix, and so ideally, yeah, it's your own journey. It's your story, and you can make it what you truly want it to be, and it might happen in 1 or 2 years, but it also might take a lot longer. So I always encourage like athletes to just be patient with themselves, obviously like persist and commit and all those like things that we have to have, but ideally like it's important to be patient and respect yourself that way too. We're human.
Yeah.
So, it's we're going to have failures along the way, and those are the ones that help us build ourselves up to achieve great things. And I think I wouldn't want it any other way. Like I would want the struggles still. If I was to do it all over again, bring on the losses, bring on the tears and the hard times in the practice room and in competition, because that's what kept me going.
Yeah.
It really did.
Wow.
Yeah, and again, like some athletes don't, like that's not for them, they, like some, you see some great athletes that have like that gold medal moment, and they win the gold and then they retire. And that's totally fine. Like that's what they decided and what they want to do, and it made sense to them. It just didn't make sense to me,
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes we sell ourselves short, we like aim for perfection all the time, and it's not easy. It's not easy. Like we can never be that, right? So, but I think like being, I guess patient, but kind to yourself in those times.
Like respecting, like what you're saying, respecting yourself.
Yeah, it's important.
Wow. So clearly you went on for a while. I wanted to ask you, so it is hard making it to the top. It's difficult. I think if there's anything that's more difficult than making it to the top is staying at the top. So you were at the top for over 12 years, from at least 2004 to 2012. How is it like dealing with that? Because when you're at the top, everyone's shooting for you. Everyone's like, there's probably people pecking away at you trying to get your spot. How is it like dealing with that? I know I watched an interview once with George St. Pierre, and he was a UFC champion, and he defended it for a long time. And
Right.
He said, to make it to the top, you can fall in an instant, but to stay at the top is the most difficult thing you can do. So how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so there were two different like ways I looked at it. Like I had the domestic, like, competing against Canadians, and then, wanting to be the best in the world. So one thing that I felt I did was I never wanted to underestimate my opponents.
Okay.
It was something like, I had in 2008 trial or 2007 trials for the 2008 games. I was in the finals, and the girl that I typically would have been up against was injured. So the girl that ended up making it through the pool, Terry McNutt, she had this wicked throw, and she could pin everyone from it. And so I beat, it was best out of 3. It's best out of 3 for our Olympic trials, as you know. And so I beat her the first match. The second match I got caught and got pinned.
Oh, man.
So I'm like, being humbled in situations like that is like an incredible time for growth.
Yeah.
Because I honestly thought I was going to die. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but in that moment, it was like my world had ended.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, what if I lose the third match? And all these, like, you know, you play these crazy amount of games. And I ended up winning the match, and I had to go on to have a wrestle off against the other girl that was injured. And it was a long process. And so those times, like, I remember, you know, people are like, well, you went to the Olympics in 2004. You're going to be going in 2008. I'm like, no, that's not the way it works.
People think it's automatic. It's situational. Like
every year counts.
Yeah.
Every year you have to step on the mat and perform. And so that was ideal for me, because those are those little challenges I needed, you know, to keep my, I guess, on my toes.
Yeah.
To keep, you know, striving for something more.
Okay.
And the next, and the next, and the next, you know? So I always respected my competitors. And I hope they feel that way too. But
it probably doesn't feel like it when you're wrestling, though.
But I mean, like, honestly, I never underestimated them. And like going out and trying to compete at my best was huge. So just having those like mini challenges, like say if it was someone, I remember Matt Gentry, teammate Olympian, awesome guy. He asked me one year, I remember this at the Nationals, he said, you know, you've always wrestled so-and-so for, you know, how many years, and you know, you've always beaten her. How are you going to go out? And this was right before the finals. And he said, like, how do you expect to go beat her again? And it was like, I was like, thank you, Matt. Thank you for creating a motivation for me.
It
you
made
know?
you hungry, right?
Right? And I was like, that's a great question. I'm like, well, I think I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing, but maybe I need to, you know,
mix it up a
mix
little.
it up. And so, like, I loved that. That was awesome. So honestly, like, those type of things helped me, you know, being humbled in certain times, created motivation, created the passion within me to, you know, want to figure out how I can continue being on top. And I honestly, like, I didn't think of it that way. Like, I mean, I felt it at times. 2008 Olympics, probably my most stressful Olympics, because I performed in Athens, and I flew under the radar in Athens, and that,
so the pressure was on after, kind of?
Yeah, I did feel it. It was challenging. I didn't have as much enjoyment in like the daily environment, I guess you could say, for a good year. But then, you know, that pressure was relieved for some reason. Maybe just realizing like you just got to live through it. You got to push through it. And yeah, so I think, like, I didn't think that I was always on top. That's the thing. Like, I always felt like there was something to work for and work towards.
Is that because, is it because this competition was so strong, or was it because you competed mostly against yourself, you feel?
Yeah, that is, I think that's a good point. I think maybe a blend. Mm-hmm. Knowing that people were, you know, even in your own training environment, you know, wanting to get takedowns on you, and, you know, how competitive are you going to put yourself in your daily training environment? Like, that's huge. That's where, like, things happen, you know, that's how growth happens. So I was challenged that way. I had a great wrestling room, you know, and Marty Calder as my coach throughout. He definitely found a way to continually drive me and push me and realize that there's so much more still to work for. Yeah. So that was definitely helpful, right? And because, like, I mean, like, you know, it's not about just you who creates success. It's the people around you that.
For sure. And
so, you know, that in terms of, like, having great teammates and training partners and coaches that help define your abilities and what you need to do to be successful. So, like, that combination, I think, is ultimately how I dealt with it. And, you know, we're fortunate in our sport. We don't just have one bout. We have multiples. Yeah. We have multiple matches throughout the year to challenge us to realize the things that we have to work on and be hungry for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I.
Because you see in tournaments, a guy will lose, and then let's say he has to come back and wrestle for bronze, or like, sorry, a woman will lose and she'll come back and wrestle for bronze, and they'll wrestle the same person, and then they'll beat them the second time, and it's just I've always been fascinated by that because it's just like you literally lost to them earlier in the day. You couldn't have improved your skills in that day. It was all a mental thing, and
Yeah.
right? So it's just, I've always been fascinated by that.
Yeah, and the people that have a struggle at losing a match and then having to come back on the backside, it's not for everyone, right? So that really challenges us. Like, how much do you really want it,
Yeah.
And
it has nothing to do with skill. Nothing to
Nothing.
do with skill, right?
Yeah, could tweak a few things. Like, okay, whatever, we could talk all day shop,
Oh, like
right?
watch out for
But
that throw or whatever, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, your tactics might change a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. You're not going to all of a sudden develop this amazing skill that's going to win you a match an hour later.
All right, so I want to ask you like a brand new question right now. What do you think was your most memorable moment of your career?
I have two. The first one would be when I made my first Olympic team. I was actually injured for the trials for the 2004 Olympics.
Okay.
And I had the opportunity, because I had international criteria, I was able to get a wrestle off. I was very thankful for Wrestling Canada to be able to give me that opportunity, because I had a really bad sprained ankle and there was no way I was going to be able to be ready to compete. So I wrestled off 2 months after, and I had to wrestle the number 2 of the trials and the number 1. And the number 1 girl I had only beaten once in my career, I believe, never when it really counted.
Okay.
So that's the one that I would lose to in the finals year after year, or, she was definitely the top contender in my weight class.
Yeah.
And so, I remember going into Edmonton, this is where it really counted. I was well prepared, I was healthy, and I got through those matches, and
everyone's calling me today. I'm sorry.
You're popular. We should just have him a part of the show.
Have a third member in.
Yeah.
Make it a triple threat, right?
So when that moment when I realized that I finally, the 9-year battle, and I finally did it.
Yeah.
And it all came together, and it was just, and all I kept just saying was, I did it, I did it, I did it. And that was a moment that I can still feel what I felt in that moment. And so that was huge. And from there on in, that's when I realized, okay, Tonya, you can do this. You can, you've done, the 9 years and all that, and all the work. You're good to go. And then the second really awesome moment was my last match in London, in the finals. Like I said, being clear, being happy, I'll never forget that moment. Mm-hmm. And I had a ton of supporters there too, which was really cool. And I really did feel like our country was behind me. And so that was, just a really amazing experience for me. That will, I'll never forget, sort of thing. Yeah.
Wow. I still fascinated by that 9-year by that 9-year window, and then you finally overcame it. So that was the moment where all clicked for you. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I can take this to the next level. Yeah. And be world class.
Absolutely. And I mean, even prior to that, I mean, you're going to international tournaments, and you're always developing your skill set along that, and it's super important to be exposed to those opportunities. Doesn't matter if you're number 1 in the country, number 2, number 3, honestly, if you can handle the competition. And I was like that. I was actually doing well internationally. I had opportunity. Thank you for that, for Wrestling Canada, because honestly, I knew I could beat good people in the world, but it was really hard for me to overcome the domestic battle.
Yeah.
So once I overcame the domestic battle, I knew that I was there to be able to compete. So it was actually happening like throughout that 9 years that I was exposed to these opportunities, and it was a mental thing that I couldn't get through on the domestic side of it.
Yeah. So it was like a battle before the battle. Like if I can win this battle, kind of like okay.
Yeah, for
And-
me, that's how it worked, honestly.
Well,
So
you probably had world-class competition in the country, so like
I
that
did.
must have been stressful to deal with, but at the same time, it was probably like a strong stimulus to make you better for when you actually go compete internationally.
Yeah, like the girl I had to beat, she was a world silver medalist and super great athlete and really experienced, older than I was and everything. And so I looked at that as really what helped me continue is like that domestic challenge was key. And I know other people now are dealing with that. We're becoming there's more depth in each weight class, so it's not easy to get through, you know. So yeah, I understand what you guys are going through now and trying to make the teams and everything. It's once you get through that, honestly, like sometimes it's those best moments afterwards, like once you get through.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Okay, so you're like the national team coach now, and you've had experience coaching for a while. When you coach someone, others than raw physical skill and talent, what one quality do you usually look for that you see and you're like, okay, this person can be great? Like others than the skill and the talent, like something that anyone can possess. What quality is it that you look for?
I think for me, like the eagerness to learn would be something that's really important to have, like at a very young age, but also like when you're still in your career into your 20s and 30s. I mean, I always have the attitude like the moment I want to stop learning is the moment I should be out of this sport. You know, like I'm still learning as a coach and under, you know, trying to find that, you know, those perfect ingredients that we need to be world class. So, you know, we talked about this in a coaches conference that I was in, or coaching cohort. It's really awesome world class coaches that I'm surrounded by in all different like multi sports, and we were having this conversation as like what characteristic would you want in your athlete? And so I mean passion's huge. Because again, that encompasses eagerness to learn, to want to strive to be.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah, they do. So I think that would be something that's huge. Another one that I think is super important is just having like that growth mindset. And it's a different word, but it kind of encompasses, you know, that eagerness to want to be better and to learn and to strive to be your best. You could have all the skills in the world. You could be the most powerful, athletic person, but if you don't really have that desire to want to learn and to grow in the sport and of yourself, I think it would be super challenging to continue.
Yeah.
So
You see that all the time. Like you see like really talented athletes. You're like, wow, this person is a monster, and then you just don't see that passion or that growth mindset, and eventually catches up with them, and they probably stop doing the sport or whatever it is they're doing, right? And it can only take you so far.
No, I totally agree.
And is that why then you think it's really important?
Yes, I do, and I honestly think that awesome athletes that come through and that are world class aren't the best athletic type of people. They've got the whole package, you know. They have that desire, that hungriness to want to be their best, and I think everything else is teachable. You know.
Yeah.
You know, skill set, and you can get quicker, you can get more powerful. And in our sport, we're very fortunate because you don't have to be that one type of athlete.
Exactly. You can like accommodate whatever body type you have to the style of wrestling you want to impose, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, everyone has their own strengths, and when you get on the mat, you know, sometimes the comparison between two athletes, you'd think, oh yeah, for sure this person's going to win, and then you realize that actually that person wasn't as mentally tough as you thought.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe the underachiever, or you know, the less athletic ends up coming through and winning. So it's just such an awesome sport that way, right?
Yeah.
Like you see it time and time again. To like, you know, like a Jordan Burroughs, like what I really like and appreciate about him as an athlete is he's got a ton of crazy athletic attributes, but he's got a great mindset, and he never thinks that he's better than anyone else. You know, he still works for it, and is humbled. Is you know, and humility's huge.
You've seen him come through in like a lot of tough matches, right? Because so he possesses both those abilities. He's a freak athlete, and he's
he's got a pretty good deal going on.
So like when you talk about having weaknesses and strength, do you think someone that has certain weaknesses and certain strength, do you think that person should focus on the weaknesses, or do you think they should double down on their strengths and kind of just focus on what they're good at and taking that to the next level?
Well, I think it's both. Like, I think you have to identify your gaps. You have to identify your, you know, I guess your weaknesses, or, you know, the things you need to improve on. But I am a strong believer, and my coaching perspective and philosophy changes over time as I, you know, the more experience I have. But I think it is really important to still key in on what you're good at and build on that, and believing in that. Because it is human nature to constantly be critical of ourselves. And I do talk about, like, you know, wanting to be better, but, you know, being better is also, you know, staying, you know, realizing your potential, and believing and being confident in who you are. That's not easy to do.
Yeah.
Right?
No. Takes 9 years sometimes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I think that, like, it is really truly important to identify both, and continually work on that. So identifying what you are good at, but also, of course, there are areas that, you know, you need to improve, and that might actually be a part of your strengths, you know?
Yeah.
It's just you know, like a different level. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. I think it's super important.
Like, it's just a matter of finding the balance between the two.
Yeah, I do think, like, I've heard, you know, different ideas out there that, you know, we need to be more on the positive, thinking more on the positive, and the positive should outweigh the negative. So, but honestly, I think every athlete's different. Some really need to focus more on their strengths and build their confidence, and, you know, but there are some that really are motivated by looking at their weaknesses and trying to improve it.
Okay.
So I think, you know, it's important to know the athlete, because and some people have a hard time identifying any of them. It's not easy to analyze. It's easy to be critical and say, oh, you know, I wrestled like crap or something like that. But, like, really, what is it? Why did you?
Yeah.
You know, what's that mean? What's the analysis of your performance? That's not easy to do. That takes a lot of time.
And you really have to put your ego aside, because, like, some people, they won't admit it. They just won't admit something that they did wrong. Like, I think the first step to fixing any problems is admitting that you have a problem. Like, for instance, if you're not confident enough, you don't want to say that. You don't want to say that because you want to seem confident so you can become confident. But you have to admit it. You look yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, I'm not confident enough. How am I going to fix this? Rather than just, I think fake it till you make it works in certain situations.
Yep.
But I think in the long term, I don't think it works.
Yeah. I think you have to still have, like, the fundamentals to be able to do that, you know? And if I was just to be like, okay, I'm feeling like crap one day, and competition day, and you're not feeling your best. Well, how am I gonna put my shoulders back, head high, fake it? Well, I can do that because I have the training and everything to back me.
Yeah.
But if you constantly just walk around and don't have anything to support that, I think that it only goes so far.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I really like what you're saying there. It's super important, it really is.
But yeah, you do need to have the base level of skill if you are gonna do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, but admitting to yourself, that's not easy to do.
It's
and,
not.
And,
It's not.
and the ego thing is really important to identify. Is your ego getting in the way of learning and growth? Then you need to admit it and find a way to get over it.
For sure.
Or put it aside, I guess you could say.
Okay, Tonya, so I think we got to wrap up soon because I think we're getting close to the 1 hour mark. But before I let you go, I want to ask you one question. So pretty much you've gone through all of it, at least from what I think. So when there's an athlete now, and especially because you have coaching experience, I think this is very good to ask you. Do you have any advice for anyone that is an athlete or anyone just pursuing a specific craft that they're very passionate about? Looking back at your career, is there one specific thing that you recommend that they do in order to maximize their potential?
I think, really being self-aware and knowing yourself is super key. And I'm learning that in my coaching as well, is self-identity and what that looks like. Knowing the characteristics that you possess naturally or the ones that you need to work on, that's a constant battle, and it evolves over time too. So 1 year you really need to work at something of yourself, and then the next year it switches because of to experience all these life
Yeah.
is really what happens. And so I think
It's not a straight path.
it's not. It's definitely not. And I think it's okay to have those bumps. It's really obstacles along the way. I think that is growth, and I think that if you're willing to accept those challenges along the way and realize that your failures can only make you stronger, and it can only help you grow as a person. I think that's really important, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And I think sometimes we need to be put into these adverse situations and really key in on some of those areas of ourselves, because it's not easy. It's not easy to get to the top. It's not easy to be successful and be your best. So yeah, I think that's something important for me is to just encourage people to get to know them and be true to themselves along the way.
Okay.
Motivation
Motivational.
Friday. I don't know.
We need like a word that means the same thing. Is a synonym for motivation that starts with an F. So if you guys know, make sure you comment that. But yeah, anyways, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Tonya Verbeek. Tonya, thank you so much. I know I got a lot of, I feel like I received a lot of value from that podcast. Hopefully the audience will as well. I'm sure they will. That was a lot of great info. I really appreciate you coming down. And yeah, till next time, maybe we can get you on the podcast sometime in the future as well.
Absolutely.
But
My
yeah.
pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was fun.